It's way too simplistic to simply say, well, let's measure each of the forces and decide profitability of the industry. That can be done, and there is some utility to that, but we want to go a lot further than that. One thing I wanted to throw in that Porter does talk a little bit about in the article, but is one of the principal criticisms of the five forces, is some people feel like it doesn't pay enough attention to the complementary nature of some businesses with others. The, excuse me, the two great examples of that are app writers and phones. What's the Windows Phone number one problem? Bad software? No, it's a lack of apps that are causing its sales to be so pitiful. Likewise, iOS and those apps have a great cachet about them, and that helps their sales, Apple's iPhone sales, because a lot of people feel like their apps are the first ones to be written. And then think of Sirius XM radio and auto manufacturers. Most cars now come with a pre-installed subscription. And so as auto sales go up and down, so do probably new subscriptions to XM Sirius satellite radio. So if it's not simply a matter of is it a good industry or bad industry, and again, there is utility in that. It's these sorts of questions that you want to be asking yourself when you do a Porter's Five Forces analysis. The real outcome of this is that you really understand the industry, you understand the key levers within this industry, you understand whether you have some ability to affect them, and you have a strategy for how to affect them. Then we're talking about great utility. Now let's move in one more ring and focus specifically for a few minutes on my competitor. The point of this chart and the strategic groups discussions is not everybody that looks like a competitor is a competitor. For example, is Kia a competitor to Ferrari? They're both auto manufacturers, but clearly their target markets are so different, they're not really a competitor to one another. But you can also look at things like how is it distributed? Are they targeting a different customer that way? Are they geographically limited? So there's all sorts of ways to tease out who may look like a competitor, but who is really not. And then that would allow you, once you've identified who is and who isn't a competitor, to not just focus on who is, but to also look at who isn't necessarily, and to say, can I move to where they are? For example, both BMW and Mercedes-Benz are doing interesting things where they're trying to make their cars go a little smaller and a little down market to try to broaden their market so that they have lower cost, lower price offerings. That can be a challenge because they put their brand at risk. And so that's a barrier to move that they're trying to finesse. Is a group that is just being pounded by external forces? If so, they're likely to come and try to move towards your position. And so there's a lot that goes on with this other than saying who is and who isn't my competitor, although that's vitally important. You even have to add to that. So now this is out of another textbook, and I encourage you to just stop the video and look at these questions. But these are questions you're starting to ask specifically about your competitors. As you go into a deep dive to better understand them and to be able to predict what they're going to do. And we'll talk about this more in the chapter on competitive dynamics. But let's just take a short ethics discussion here and say, what are you willing to do in terms of dealing with your competitors? Most people have no problem with doing any of the top three bullets. Commonly done. I don't think anybody has any ethical issues with it. How about sifting their trash? Believe it or not, that's legal. It's been adjudicated in the court system, and when a company puts something out in a public trash receptacle, it's considered public material. And yes, there are companies that really do dumpster diving, trying to find out what some of their competitors are up to, and other very similarly interesting things, excuse me, to try to figure out what competitors are up to. How about hiring away their superstars or even just their average employees? Companies do that. It is ethical so long as you're trying to secure their talent. It is unethical and becomes illegal when you're trying to do it to get them to tell what their previous employer is up to. How would you feel about sending somebody on a fake job interview, basically an intelligence gathering mission? There you really start to skate out onto people's concerns and ethical thin ice. This is not something I would personally do, although you'll see that there are competitive intelligence firms that do these sorts of things for companies. And usually the way companies make themselves feel better is they don't do it themselves. They hire another company to do it for them, and they just kind of say, don't tell us what you did, just get us this information. But I think most people would not do that. I personally would not do that. How about you go into a conference room of one of your key customers, and it just so happens the meeting before in that same building where your rivals meeting with that same customer, and oh, they just happen to leave copies of their business proposal on the table. Can you whip out your phone and quickly snap copies of that? Is that fair? Is that ethical? It's actually illegal, and companies have gotten into trouble for doing things like that. And so, because of this, or not because of this, and so now we've looked at the three rings: the general environment, the industry environment, and focused on the competitor. Now it's time to put that analysis to use, and you do that by making some decisions and building some forecasts. Let me give you the two polar extremes of forecasting. One is that we're never going to build a forecast because everything always changes, and forecasts are typically inaccurate, and we're not going to mess with it. And you'll see some good jokes about that from Dilbert on the next slide. The other flip side is what you call paralysis by analysis, where you'll never know everything. You'll never have 100% confidence, and you're always trying to build a better forecast. Consequently, you don't get anything done. So now let's talk personally for a second, because I want you to view yourself as a business. I encourage you to keep information sources in all three of those spheres: the general environment, the industry environment, and then the competitor analysis. For me, I read the Wall Street Journal for information on the competitor analysis. In the industry analysis, I still, frankly, track the aviation industry, and now I am getting very interested in the energy industry. So I tend to read articles that are specific to those, and I read publications that are specific to those. Competitor analysis, to the extent that you can find things on the web, dive in. I encourage you to similarly keep up an active intelligence program in all those areas, so that you step into your career as informed as you can be. So I am a big fan of Dilbert, and you see Dilbert making fun of people and their inability to forecast. And of course, it's very easy to do because there's all kinds of forecasts that are wrong every day. So the question is, you're going to do the best you can and roll on. I'll talk about this more later, but one of the hallmarks typically of a winning team in the business strategy game that you're going to play in this class is that they're good forecasters. I'm going to stop the video here because I'm going to tell you about the impact of forecasts and what it means to get it right and get it wrong as we wrap up into the last section for this chapter. Join me then.